Well, hey, welcome back to Church Chat.
Yeah, this is our Church Chat podcast here at Maitland Presbyterian Church, and so we're here on my couch chatting in church about church.
We've done lots of podcasting in the past, but I think this is our fourth podcast on this arc, as my kids would call it. My current arc. This is our fourth one.
Yeah. So it's been nice. We've gotten some great engagement and stuff.
Some great questions. Keep asking good questions. Yeah. We appreciate that.
I'm really excited. Today we have a very important guest. Today our guest on our podcast is Carey Nieuwhof.
So Carey Nieuwhof is a huge deal in church leadership and strategy. He writes an amazing blog. He has lots of great wisdom about where the church is headed in the future. And so we are going to read his blog post together and talk about it. He's not actually here.
But, his words are here.
His wisdom will be with us.
Yeah. Is this an ethical thing to do? So you have a guest on a podcast where you're just reading something they wrote? I think it is.
I don't know. Let us know. What do y'all think?
Yeah.
So we'll have other guests in the future, but today it's just us and
Carey next
Nieuwhof.
Week's guest, Stephen King.
No, stop. So today we're going to read some things from him or discuss some things that he wrote about change. We thought we'd talk some about change because church change is really hard.
All right, first, how many Presbyterians does it take to change a light bulb?
How many?
Change!
Oh my gosh. This is what I'm living with. This is what I'm working with every day.
My grandmother paid for that light bulb.
So change is a challenge probably in any organization, but and so if you're leading or working in any organization, I think some of the principles we'll talk about today are helpful for anybody.
Yeah. I'm thinking of more change jokes. Hold on.
But yeah, you keep thinking. I'll just talk about change while you're thinking of a joke. But change is really hard. Why do you think change is so hard for churches? Truly, like not just jokey, but like why do you think it's so hard?
Well, I think because part of the reason people come to church is the comfort of the familiar.
Okay.
Yeah. And so when you come expecting, what you've had your whole life and something's different, like sometimes that physically hurts. If that's what you're really coming there for.
Especially like the world changes really fast. So if you're like, I just know I know it'll happen when I walk in the door of my church, that provides like some comfort.
Absolutely. And that's in tradition is a big reason we're here. We're a 2,000-year-old book club, and we're still reading that same book and talking about that book and seeing how it changed our lives. But that's that change part, that you can't read the Bible and not change. And if you're not changing, you're not really reading the Bible right. So, why do you think change is so hard for church people?
Yeah, because our denomination, or is it? I don't know if it's just the Reformed and Always Reforming. Is that the Reformed Church or just the PCUSA?
I think it's all of the Reformed Church. Yeah.
So there's this saying you always hear, like in our polity, and it talks about how we were Reformed and always reforming, which means we should continue to like change and grow and adapt to be most effective in our current world. But that's not always easy to do.
No, it's tough. And sometimes people want to change for the wrong reasons.
Okay, like what would be some wrong reasons for change?
Well, just because, I don't know, you're bored.
Right, and I think that's a temptation as a leader always, right? Is to be like, well, let's just change it up. Although we're probably the other way where we're like, no, everything's good. Don't make any changes.
Right.
Don't stir the pot.
Yeah.
One time I was thinking about change, and here at our church, we're in Orlando, in the Metro Orlando area, and one thing we do every year on the anniversary of the Pulse tragedy is we ring our church bells, and it's just one small thing we do to remember that, like, just a horrific day. And but to ring our particular church bells is not like a straightforward process,
because 20 years ago they put a cell tower on top of the church bell tower, and so you can't actually ring the bell anymore. They had to make it like
with a rope. So like we have the bells still ring, but between us and the bell is no longer a rope. There's a cell phone tower. So we have like a computer
system.
On top. Okay.
Yeah.
Because you've climbed up in there.
Yes.
To clear out like bird sticks?
Ospreys made a nest in there. It was blocking the drainage. And so while Jonathan and I were up there, we started climbing over the side to, I don't know, for fun. And we discovered that, while it's brick going up to the church bell, the siding of the cell tower looks like brick, but it's actually fiberglass. So we got down and our arms were just like itching like crazy and all red and inflamed. And
I feel like we should talk another day on why you and Jonathan were the ones who had to climb up in the bell tower to clean out a bird's nest.
Because no one else would do it.
So thinking about the church bell, to ring our church bell, now it's controlled by like a computer that rings the bells. But it's not like a current computer. It's a computer from, I don't know, 1990 something probably.
I guess.
So it's a keypad. So like to make the bells like go ding, you have to put in like 13 numbers in a row and hit enter.
It reminds me of the time on The Office when Dwight first took over as manager and he made everyone put a code in to use the copier, but it was like 30 digits.
Yes, so like no one could do it right.
Yeah.
That's how it feels. So we told the bells on that day, and I was watching that day. So you push in this code and you hit enter, and then it's quiet, and then you hear this like creaking and grinding and like the machine, and then you hear these old bells that have just been for a long time, just like arthritic bones. You're just trying really hard to move and to ring, and then they toll, and then you do it again. And the one year we did that, I remember thinking like that is change in the church, like as the church moves to become more supportive and embracive of the LGBTQ community and repents for what it has done in that area of harm, that it's taken way too long to get there because it's just you put in the number and it's got to talk to the computer and it's got to make the bell move, and it's a slow and cumbersome system, but change is still possible.
Yeah.
And at the end of it, there's this beautiful sound, but change is never quick in the church.
Yeah.
Like,
no, that's very true.
We're like right now, our church is in the process of a negotiation with our city to sell a little piece of a parking lot, and we're working with other partners in the community that are selling parts of theirs and talking, and on their end, they can just be like, yeah, we agreed to the contract. And we're like, that's adorable. Like on our end, we have to have lots of meetings and talk to our board, and it goes to our congregation for a vote, and it's lots of steps, which is good because that protects us from
I think
harm.
that was the hardest thing for most like new pastors to get used to is the phrase is the glacial pace of kids. If you're listening now, glaciers are something we used to have before we all lived in FEMA huts. But yeah, the glacial pace of church life and the glacial pace of change. And it's pretty hard at first, but then you kind of get used to it, and it's kind of nice because it takes some of the pressure off that like, oh, there's a change we need to make. It'll take 18 months.
Yeah, or 18 years.
Yeah, but you know, we'll see opportunities that come forward, and we'll be able to embrace them.
Yeah, we were talking to one of our members of the staff team here about that you know, some things that were talked about like 8 years ago and are happening now, and just it's about patience and incremental change and intentional support, but it takes time.
Yeah.
And we've been thinking a lot about this because there's been like some things that are small changes and some big changes here at the church.
Yeah. We painted the narthex. You know, and
which, if you're not a church person, that's the lobby.
Narthex is Greek for lobby.
We painted it, and that doesn't sound like a big thing, but it's a big deal when you make a change to a building.
Yeah.
When that color has been on the walls for since forever.
My grandmother picked that color.
Okay. Oh, wait, we don't know who picked the color.
Probably somebody's grandmother.
But it's been around so long that when we took the paint off, it's been painted twice the same color. Like there were 2 layers of the paint.
Yeah, it looks beautiful now.
It looks beautiful, but that's a change.
Yeah, that was a change.
Even though it's positive.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
What are some other changes that have happened recently?
Our traditional worship leader is leaving under good terms, but just to move on to other, endeavors in his career.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're hiring in someone new, and we're going to bring him onto the podcast. His name's Jonathan.
Yeah.
But that's a big change.
That is a big change.
And sometimes when lots of changes happen too, that I think it raises anxiety even more.
Yeah.
But why do you think that is?
Well, because church people are kind of territorial.
Yeah.
It's like, you can make a change, just don't touch my stuff.
Right.
And literally sometimes with stuff. Like,
don't touch my stuff.
We've also cleaned out some closets.
Yeah. There's been a lot of change, really, over the past few months.
It's so funny. At the church, Megan and I are like the only 2 people who can sometimes throw things away. And sometimes we have to like come in the middle of the night and take it to the dumpster.
But we haven't thrown away your stuff.
Yeah.
If you're listening to this and you're like, I need to go to the church real quick. We really try not to throw things away that aren't actually trash.
But because we can have space or we can have stuff. And so we need space.
Right. But like sometimes we'll open a closet and it is like bulletin inserts from 1996. I mean, that's the kind of stuff we're talking about where like nobody felt like they could be the one to get rid of it. And we can authoritatively say, this one can go. Yeah.
But sometimes, people show up. This happened a couple times. These people show up that they don't go to church here. They don't live in the state. But when they're in town, they'll like come to the church and see if something that like their mom or dad or grandpa like put in the church is still there.
And not like an antique pew or something, like just something really small.
Yeah.
The last one, like it was something where we were like, I don't even know what that is. Like it wasn't here when we got here.
Right. Yeah.
That's a challenge. So we have some Neuhoff things.
Okay, yeah. So our guest, Carrie Neuhoff. Thanks for being here, Carrie. Oh, you're welcome.
Bringing it
It's a pleasure to be here.
On my computer now. All right, so he's written a lot about change. You should read everything.
Yeah, if you don't know who Carrie Neuhoff is, you should know who Carrie Neuhoff is.
If you're interested in church strategy, church development, where's the church, like big church, like churches everywhere, going to be?
And I believe his website is
10 years.
Carrie Neuhoff.
It's carrieneuhoff.com. So Carrie is Carey, Neuhoff, Nieuwhof.com. He should have just gone by like Carrie Smith.
I mean, that was probably an easy URL to get, though.
That's true. So Carrie Neuhoff, Nieuwhof.
It's right here on the screen.
And Antoine will put it right there on the screen. CarrieNeuhoff.com, and he writes just a lot of things about church leadership and church development.
Really smart guy.
So he says, he's written an article, and we won't do all 13 probably, but he said 13 facts about change that leaders miss. So we're going to be like gut check for ourselves on if these are things we miss.
Okay.
And for those of you that are in any leadership, we hope this might be helpful to you too, because this is not just about the church.
All right. So what's the first one?
Are you ready?
Yeah,
Dave has not read these yet. So
okay.
this is raw for him.
Can you do like a Carrie Neuhoff impression while you read it?
I've never heard him speak. I've only read him.
He just sounds like a Canadian guy. So
okay.
Just say sorry and a lot.
Wow. Okay. All right. Unedited, unscripted. That is the podcast.
I should have that tattooed.
Number 1. People aren't opposed to change nearly as much as they are opposed to change they didn't think of. What do you think?
Oh, I mean, that definitely is true for me.
That is.
I love ideas that I've had. And sometimes when someone has an idea that I think is great, but I didn't have it, I'm like mad at first. I'm like, I should have that idea. That's a great one. But I've
you
definitely...
even feel that when we go to a restaurant and like I order something and you order something. And if I did a better job ordering, like you're very put out.
I hate when you win the restaurant. But yes. Yeah. So people, they're opposed to change that they didn't think of.
Which is probably why it's so important in a church setting to have people involved in change. Like, That's why we do surveys here all the time at the church, is to say, like, what do you want to see happen in this, so we can take that feedback before we make a change. And then you are someone who thought of the change.
And I think some people could hear this and think, you kind of get mad about it. Like, okay. I had a good idea and you just don't like it because it wasn't your idea. But especially in church leadership or any kind of big organization, it really is important to teach and to help people get to conclusions on their own. Because the only true, learning is self-learning and self-discovery. And so when people, if you can kind of put give them the information and maybe help them along a little bit, we can come to these conclusions together.
Which you're right is why it's so important with change too, to just not it's so tempting as a church leader, as any leader, to be like, well, I'm making this change and I'm heading off in this direction, and you look back and you are alone. Right. You need to build consensus and support before you start walking.
Yeah. And you might not end up exactly where you thought you were going to end up, but at least you got there together.
Early in our ministry, we had a few things where we're like, we are going to start a contemporary service, just Dave and I. And so we went into the little church gym, and I played the piano, and Dave sang the guitar and sang, and it was us and one person named Kat who showed up. It was just us, because we made this change, but we made it all by ourselves in a vacuum with no committee, no support, no engagement, no investment. And that is often not as effective unless you're just really committed to do it alone if you have to.
Or much better at guitar and piano than we are.
Yeah, there's a reason we don't do that now. That was back in the day. Back in the day.
Back when I had hair.
All right. Number 2, change is hard because people crave what they already like.
Yeah.
I mean, that is why Chipotle is so successful. And Panera and all these things.
Chipotle, they've had how many outbreaks of different foodborne illnesses,
for sure.
But they get through it every time.
Yeah, because people are just no, I want my cilantro lime rice. Yes. I know when I go, it'll be the same every time I go, and I know that will be the food I want to eat. But I understand.
But I think there's a good the positive side of that for churches is that people are here in church because they like it. Mm-hmm. You can't just leave your people behind. Right. So there are certain things, they can take that too far for sure. But the essentials of what we're here to do as a church should be unchanging. But just the way we present it, or different Yeah.
The challenge probably then is you have a group of people who are already in a church, so they like the stuff that's happening. And then the world changes and we have to reach a new generation or a new reality because, I mean, certainly now the world is very different post-pandemic. And so we have to change a little and maybe even do some things that aren't our favorite things to be able to reach people with the gospel, which is our calling as Christians. And so it's that tension, I think, in any organization and including in the church to balance maintaining the things that we like and the traditions that we hold to with being willing to do some things that feel new or uncomfortable or different to be able to reach other people with the gospel.
Absolutely.
And that's the hard part, is how do we hold those things in tension? How do we not get rid of all the traditions and things, which then we lose like the foundations of kind of who we are as a church?
Yeah.
But then how do we also have a comfort with being uncomfortable to do something new? Because even things that once were new are now just comfortable traditions. Like contemporary music was new, and now it's the thing that some folks do because that's what they like and what they know. The traditional service, of course, the same.
Like the pipe organ was once a brand new invention,
right?
And it was the contemporary worship. It was the Chris Tomlin of 400 years ago. But yeah, whatever. And so when people think tradition, like what's the tradition?
Right.
They're not thinking, church history.
Right.
They're thinking, what did I grow up with?
Yeah.
Or what am I? What's about 40 years old? And when they ask, I like contemporary, they're asking, what's 20 years old? So we're never really interacting with the tradition, except when we say the creeds or we read the Bible or
that's a great
do
point.
the sermon.
Yeah,
thank you. I'm very smart.
You're very wise. That's a great point. But yeah, when we say tradition, we're talking about the very most recent tradition, not 100 years ago or 200 years ago, but really, what did I know when I was a kid that was formational for me?
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, number 3, you ready?
Yeah.
Okay. Leaders crave change more than most people because they're, leaders. And I think that's true. Except I think it's true, I would add a caveat. I think that's very true that we tend to be more excited about change because we're kind of in the front and looking ahead, like here's where we're going. Except when we get afraid of it, because we also really don't like conflict and controversy.
Sometimes leaders really fear change because we don't want to deal with the...
You don't want to deal with the fallout.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's easier just to be like, I know what this could be, but I'm not going to touch it because I don't want to get beat up about it.
Right.
Yeah.
But sometimes I see things and I wish I could unsee them.
Right.
Because I'm like, I just had an idea and that's going to be expensive.
That's going to be a problem.
Yeah.
Right.
But it's fun too, like to be able to see things and bring them, over 3 years to happen.
That kind of leads to the next one. The next two, actually. One of them is most of the disagreement around change happens at the strategy level. He says most leaders stop at aligning people around a common mission and vision, but you also have to align people around a common strategy.
That's really
and that's
key.
true. Like our vision as a church is love like Jesus. And I think the majority of our people would be like, yes.
Right.
And then when we have to say to love like Jesus, we need to change X, Y, and Z.
Yeah, we need to advocate for this group of marginalized people.
Right. That's where it gets that gets harder.
Yeah.
And so that's a good reminder, too. It doesn't mean your vision is wrong. If you're a leader and you're leading and there's conflict, doesn't mean the vision is wrong. It means maybe you sold the vision, but not the approach to achieving the vision.
Well, and sometimes the vision is the easiest part to come up with, but the nuts and bolts, how do we get this done? That's when it actually happens.
And that's when change starts. That's when the thing I have to protect might be at risk.
Right.
A vision statement doesn't say here's how that's going to impact the thing that you super care about in the organization.
Right.
That's just it's a vision. That's nice. Those are pretty words.
Right. But actually putting it,
Or when you're talking about a church budget, and to say okay, we have this vision, but we need to allocate funds towards this new initiative. And it's whoa, wait.
Yeah.
But is that going to take money out of my pocket, as a mission program or a whatever?
Right. So what was it again?
Oh, so that one was most of the disagreements around change happen at the strategy level. So it's not about the vision. It's about aligning people in a strategy. All right, you ready? Number 5?
Okay.
Okay, you getting bored? You good?
Oh, this is great.
Okay. Number 5, usually no more than 10% of the people...
Do you need a treat?
You need a snack? 10% of the people you lead are opposed to change. No more than 10% of the people you lead are opposed to change, usually.
Yeah, they're just a really loud 10%.
And that's what number 6 is. Number 6 says, loud does not equal large. Just because the opponents of change are loud does not mean they're a large group. The most opposed people make the most noise. So don't make the mistake most leaders make when they assume large equals loud. Almost every time it doesn't.
That reminds me, maybe you can find it and put up on screen, the graphic. It's like showing people's interconnectedness.
Yeah.
And that like the loud people, like if everyone is related, somehow interconnected with the loud people, they think everyone thinks this.
Right.
But it's just that it's like the really loud people who have the most, involved probably, who have the most at stake.
Yeah.
Who are oppositional. But sometimes they're the only people who will tell you the truth as well.
Right.
So that's where it's hard, where, sometimes church leaders and all kinds of leaders are way too feedback based.
Right.
Because they're going off of just a handful of people. And so those people are kind of steering the ship. But sometimes people go too far the other direction and don't listen.
Right.
To feedback because they're the leaders. And, I remember, I don't know, 15 years ago, I had a guy who didn't like me at a church, but I really valued him because, like, he was the only one who would tell me when I was messing up.
Okay.
Because everyone else liked me, and they didn't want to, tell me that oh, you could do this better.
I'm laughing because I feel like now I'm that person.
Babe, you've always been that person.
Where sometimes Dave will tell me, he's like, I just really appreciate you're the only one who will tell me the truth.
Oh, yeah.
Because for some reason, sometimes you live in this world where people are just like, whatever you want is fine. And I'm the only one who will be like, that's a bad idea. You need to not do that.
But
so
yeah,
good to know it's just me and this guy.
What do you think about that?
Like I don't like conflict at all. And so I am like, I like change a lot though. And so those are two conflicting things in my personality. Like I like planning for the future. I like having a vision for where we're going and taking incremental steps to achieve a vision that we believe in. Like I'm really motivated by like a future focus of where things could be instead of where we've already gone. So much so that sometimes I have to like stop and make myself like turn around and appreciate. We talked in a sermon one time about that. Like we're hiking up this mountain in Scotland and all you see is like what you have to climb ahead of you. But then we stopped and turned around and the view is like amazing.
Yeah.
And I'm bad at stopping and to look back and appreciate what I've done, which there's definitely a scriptural teaching about that. In the Old Testament, especially over and over again, it says like, remember what God's done. Remember, we got to remember. But because I like change, I don't always understand why people are like, oh, wait, what are you doing? But on the same vein, I don't like conflict. And so when the 10% or whatever does get loud, that my initial temptation is to be like, just give them whatever they want. Just make it go away so I can get back to work. Because I don't like that. But that's when we were talking this week about, Moses in the Old Testament and how Moses as a leader, it wasn't about what he even wanted. Some of the time, it was just about being obedient. Like God told him to go this way and to lead the people that way. And so that's where you go.
Right.
And sometimes that's really great and everyone thinks it's really great. And some days are harder, but you just got to like keep walking towards the promised land vision that God's given you. And even if it's hard.
Absolutely.
But sometimes it's so much easier to just be like, it's just give whatever they want. Just put it out in the hall.
Right.
I don't know.
Yeah. And those voices are the ones that we remember. Like we say, like we know our critics' social security numbers, but sometimes we don't even know our supporters' names.
Oh my gosh, yeah. Someone can tell me a positive thing, and it'll just like hit me and run right off. Like I don't even absorb it. But if someone said something negative, like I could probably tell you every negative thing someone has said about me in ministry in 20 years, which is not healthy at all, but it's something I'm aware. The critic voices are very loud when you hear them.
All right, this is great. What's next?
So that's our vulnerability. How about y'all? How do you guys deal with conflict and criticism? All right, I like this one. Number 7. Most people opposed to change do not have a clearly articulated vision of a preferred future. And he goes on and says this, they just want to go back to Egypt. And then he says, you can't build a better future on a vision of the past. Remember that when they tell you about how good things used to be. I was like, oh, that's a good one.
Yeah. And we were in buying that rug the other day. And
we bought a rug. We're very interesting people. We went out and we bought a rug.
Home Goods.
Yes.
I wonder if Home Goods could sponsor our podcast. I would love to get more rugs. But the kid who was helping me, young kid, and they have this I was really admiring, they have this cool system with like these, the rugs are all hanging from these like racks and they're way up in the air. And the kid came over and he was just like, oh, this is terrible. This system is the worst. And I'm on this new kick where I like am really engaging with strangers. And
this is new for him.
Yeah.
In the past, we go in someplace and I would be like, hi, how are you doing? How's your day? Dave is like, oh my gosh. They're going to tell her. They're going to tell her how their day is. But no, he's doing a really good job. Like, I feel like you're really engaging people.
Yeah, like the other day we were checking out at Walmart, and this guy in front of us had a sandwich and 3 Barbie dolls.
Oh, yeah.
And I was like, so did you come in for the sandwich or the Barbie dolls?
And then we had a great conversation with him. It turns out he has like a comedy stuff he does on Instagram.
Uncle Vic, the real Uncle Vic.
The real Uncle Vic. Now, we haven't watched this stuff, so we're not like endorsing. Like, I have no idea. But he came in for the sandwich, but he saw the dolls and thought they'd be great for his comedy show.
Yeah. So anyway, the guy getting the rugs, he just couldn't talk about how stupid, this system was. And so I was feeling like, let's encourage this kid. I was like, well, how would you do it? I'd love to hear, your idea. And he's stopped. He's like, well, just not this. It's like, okay, well, there are a lot of rugs up here and I can get to all of them. So I think this is a pretty good system. I didn't say any of that. I was like, okay, well, thank you for your help. But yeah, I think it's so much, or what was the other quote? Oh man, who's the baseball guy? Yeah, me asking about baseball, but famous baseball player who said, sports ball, who said, you have no idea how easy this game is until you get up into that broadcasting box.
Yeah.
And so it's much easier to say no than to think of an alternative.
Yeah. And that's why, like, if you have someone in your life, whether you're the leader or someone else the leader, like, if you see that someone has a clear sense of vision that you really believe in, like, hang out with that person, like, follow them where they're going, because it could be great. And then if you're someone who's in the position to cast vision, make sure you share it with people, because it's much more compelling if people feel like they know where you're going and why.
That I think that's I don't know if I might step on a toe of Carey Nieuwhoff's toe.
But he's not really here, so
But
it's
if
fine.
I step on his toe, he'll say sorry to me because he's Canadian. But I think that's why churches especially get stuck sometimes, because a church is a family. Like, it operates like a family for good and for bad. And if you've got in a family, if mom or dad is unhappy, people like shut it down. Like, you have whole families get stuck, and you have churches that any kind of organization gets stuck because of one person, because no one wants to upset them. And so it's really hard to deal with. And so it's the easiest thing is just to do nothing.
Right.
And so I don't know I think we've had some luck doing things in spite of that, but it's still tricky.
It's very tricky. Well, that kind of leads to the next one. Number 8, fear of opposition derails more leaders than actual opposition.
Oh, that hurts.
And then it says, courage isn't the absence of fear. It's the determination to lead through your fears. And by the way, this does wonders for your faith. Holy moly.
Yeah, the fear of opposition more than the actual opposition. That's so true, because like I always imagine things, going horribly, and then they go like, it's never nearly as bad as you think it's going to be.
No. Like sometimes we've had to make big changes, like at a staff level or things, and you send out the announcement to the congregation, and we like brace ourselves for this tidal wave of opposition, and then it's like crickets.
Yeah.
And then we get paranoid, like what are they were thinking, and then it turns out like it just wasn't as big of a hiccup as we thought it would be.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's real. All right, number 9. Ready? Okay.
Yeah.
Are we still good? Do you need a snack?
I'm okay.
Number 9. Buy-in happens when most people fully understand why rather than what or how.
Absolutely.
Yes.
You got to lead with why. And we forget that so much. Like we do. We think that people just understand it, as soon as we tell them.
Right.
But like the why, like if you give people a reason why, they'll figure out all the rest on their own.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. I feel like Jesus was really good at the why. Like he did the what, he would heal, but then he's like, right, but you understand it, like it's harder to forgive sin than to heal. Or like he just, I feel like we see that a lot in Jesus's ministry, that he never just did a thing. He would do a thing and then like explain what's next or explain why it happened or what mattered about it. And he was just teaching all the time, not just doing. And I think sometimes as leaders, for all of us, it's tempted just to go do the things and then hope people put the pieces together and then you go home.
Right.
But you got to talk about like, here's big picture why we're doing it. Here's next level picture. Why are we doing?
Yeah.
More of like a strategic planning approach in some ways. Start with your vision and your why, and then go to the nitty gritty of how do we get there.
Absolutely.
I wonder, what do you think? How do you keep the why in front of you as a leader? Like, it's easy as a leader to get caught in just the like day-to-day slog of the what's, like the emails and the meetings and the emergencies, and there's just a lot of business even in the church of the day-to-day. Like, what's like a practical thing all of us as leaders could do to keep our why in front of us as church leaders?
I mean, I think part of it is just, especially for church leaders, like your personal faith.
Yeah.
It can't just be your job.
Right.
And how you're growing as a disciple and what you're hearing in the Bible. What do you think?
Yeah, I like that. And then to encourage one another. A lot of us are lucky to serve on a team in a church. We have an amazing team here at Maitland Pres, truly one of the best. And if you're on a team of staff or with your elders, with your other leaders, to remind each other of the why. Like, okay, I know that we just had to spend an hour talking about the parking lot, but the big vision is here. We're creating a church that can tell people about Jesus. Like, that's our why, is our faith. But it's really easy, I think, especially for churches and probably other nonprofits, organizations with like a passion, a vision, a social impact, to get so caught in the organizational stuff, the stewardship and the finance and the personnel, and all those things are super important. But how do we like remember the why when we get caught in the weeds of those things? And I think if we can do that as leaders, it keeps us inspired to go back the next day and keep going, because some days are just discouraging when you're dealing with the weeds of it.
Yeah.
The weeds. So I don't know. That one convicts me. Like, I might need to make a little thing to put on my desk about like my why. So that when I'm in the 85th email, I can just be like, okay, it's not about the emails, it's about the why.
Absolutely.
So that one's a good one. I like that. Okay. Unimplemented change will always become relief or regret. You'll be glad you did, or you'll wish you had. That one kind of plays both sides. Like,
an unimplemented change.
Yeah. So if you had an idea and you didn't do it, that it was important to do, it'll become relief or regret. You'll either look back and be like, I should have done it, or you'll look back and be like, I'm so glad we didn't do that.
Oh, that's true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it can be, maybe that's a good, I don't know what you do with that, except to know no matter what you do, you might be punished or rewarded.
Well, and I think the good thing about, church life is it's going to be okay no matter what. That as long as,
I love that.
If
because of our why.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That even the Holy Spirit can use like the crappiest sermon ever preached in someone's life.
For both of us.
It's sad when churches close, but
right. Yeah.
There's no stopping, the church.
Yeah, there's no decision or change or unimplemented change or whatever that you can make as a church leader or as any, within the church setting in any capacity, that God will be like, oh, well,
I was going to save the world, but Dave messed it up. Good job, Dave.
I feel like we should talk about that. It's not like a voice. It's not like something you felt in the past. You okay? You need a snack?
I'm okay. But thanks, though. Snack
You're
later.
welcome. You're welcome. All right, you ready? One more? Or a few more. We're almost there. Okay. 11. Incremental change brings about incremental results. You'll be tempted to compromise and reduce vision to the lowest common denominator, incremental change. Just know that brings incremental results, and incrementalism inspires no one. Whew.
I don't know
that I agree with that one, Carrie Newhoff.
Yeah.
And you're not here, so I can do that.
Sorry. Oh, sorry. That was more British. I can't do a Canadian accent.
You got there. You'll get there.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes incremental change is the best you can do.
Right.
You have a. How do you? I don't. Yeah. I'm stumped. What do you think about that?
Yeah. I mean, I guess that one's hard for me because I do think sometimes it's better to take like to know where you're going, but to take 18 steps to get there so that your people are with you as you're going. Where if we were to lead with like the final thing that we could see that we're heading towards, it would feel too big, too scary, too out of the box. So we can say like, let's take this one step. All right, let's take another step, kind of the one day at a time thing. Like with our kids, when I'm not saying our church is like our kids, but when our kids were young and we'd be in the car and they'd be like, are we almost there? And be like, yep. And even if we weren't, it was like, yeah, we're almost there. We're almost there. Because if you tell them like, no, we have 18 hours to go, they would have like revolted.
Right.
But it was like, no, we just have 30 minutes till we get to McDonald's and then we get a snack. Like they needed like horizons to keep them encouraged. So I don't know. That one, I would say there's something to be said for setting, again, like horizons or benchmarks, or like, hey, when we get to this next piece, we can stop for a minute and take a break and then we'll keep going. Because you're trying to turn like, it's equivalent to a huge cruise ship, not a rowboat. Like you can't just like turn on a dime and go a new direction.
And I definitely agree with that. And I think it freaks people out. Like if it feels good as a leader to be like, this is where we're going.
Right.
But if you make these grand statements, well, one, sometimes it feels good enough to make the grand statement that you get enough of a dopamine hit that you don't have to do anything else.
Right.
And two, sometimes that grand statement just like riles up opposition, so you're never going to do anything.
Right.
And so it's important for as a leader for you to have a 10-year vision, but you only have to give that out a little bit at a time.
Right.
But on the other hand, especially in a church, like it's not our church, it's their church.
Yeah.
Well, it's God's church, but like, that pastors don't stay at churches forever.
Right.
And so if you don't really share that 10-year, 20-year vision, that it's not going to outlast you.
Right.
So, I think that there's, and it's harder to do like the long range planning and all that stuff. And sometimes the long range, the big vision gets lost when you include everybody at the beginning. But I think it is important to try and build a team, a community around that long-term thing so it can outlast you.
I like that. And I think as a leader to identify that it's not a one-size-fits-all approach as you work with people in your church or your organization, that one person that's on your leadership team might be someone who needs to know, okay, where are we going to be in 10 years so I can be excited? Like, I'm one of those people. I need to know this is heading somewhere.
Yeah.
And so to give them, like, pull back the curtain and say, here's where I think God's leading us over these next 10 years. Here's where I think this is going. You might have someone else, though, that needs the, like, nitty-gritty, one day at a time. What's our next step? I just want to know the next step.
Yes.
And so for that person, they may not want to know the whole big picture and all the big things that are going to change. Maybe just say, well, our next project that we're doing is this, and here's why, with like a nod to the vision. But maybe you, like, as a leader, I think it is important to work with different people in different ways.
Absolutely.
On what you think, what will inspire them, not because they can't handle it, but some people are more excited and inspired by like one bite at a time, and some people want to know the whole picture. But you don't want to like tip the apple cart with someone who that would be too much for.
I totally agree. All right, what else you got, Carrie?
All right, two more. Transformation happens when the change in question becomes a part of the culture. You won't transform an organization until, and this is a big one, people no longer want to go back to the way it was. So he wrote another whole article about this that I read, and it was talking about how there's a difference between behavior change and transformation. And like you can change behaviors somewhat quickly. You can say like, now we do worship in this way, or now this is our vision statement. Like you can change the specific day-to-day stuff of how we operate somewhat quickly in an organization if you've got authority. I don't know that we do, but someone might who's listening to this. But it's not actual transformation where people believe this is the new way that we are for years. Like it takes years to get to that point where people no longer, like if you leave the room and everyone reverts back to what they were doing before, there's probably not been transformation. Right. It was that you were implementing a change and enforcing it.
Yeah.
But if you leave the room and things keep humming along in the same direction, there's been transformation. But I may be mistaken, but I think, he said this happens in 5 to 7 years. Only then do most people not want to go back to Egypt. He keeps referencing Egypt. Most people would know this listening, but that's a reference to the Old Testament and the Israelites, and God frees them out of slavery in Egypt and brings them into the wilderness and some wandering, but eventually to the Promised Land. But they spend most of their time on the way to the Promised Land complaining about wanting to go back into slavery in Egypt, even though it was horrible, because it was just they did not have that vision for where they were going.
Yeah. Yeah, and part of the reason they wandered is so that that generation could die.
Right. Yeah, that was part of it. That was part of God being like,
your kids are going to go into the
you
promised
guys
land.
can't handle this.
Yeah.
That is not a church strategy, though. You can't just wander around waiting for the next generation. 5 to 7 years is a long time.
That is.
Like, that is a lot of patience. Mm-hmm. So we've been here 8 years, and I see some truth in this. Like, things that we started 8 years ago are finally really a part of the culture. But that's especially complicated when you have a lot of turnover in your leadership.
Right.
Our session turns over every 3, basically they have 3-year terms. So
yeah, 3 classes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that means it really is, you need to have a staff and pastors that have been there for a long time if you're talking about transformation, because none of our elder leaders would be there long enough to see that all the way
But you
through.
can have, some churches have, 6-year terms, or
that's true.
Or smaller churches have like matriarchs or patriarchs who really do lead the church, no matter who the pastor is.
Or if you're like, you're an elder and you just went off session, I don't know, Cindy Maxwell, El Marine, or talking to you guys now. But if you went off, like, if you really want to see the changes that got implemented, like, become part of the culture and really transformative, it is your job then to like stick with it and encourage it, even if you're not like actively on your board at your church, like to be a part of that force for making it transformation.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, last one.
The last one.
Thank you for joining us, Carrie Newhoff.
Yeah, thanks for being here, man.
13. The greatest enemy of your future success is your current success. Successful organizations create a culture of change because they realize that success tempts you to risk nothing until decline forces you to re-examine everything. Keep changing. Reformed and always reforming. That one's really hard, because on the one hand, if something's working, you don't want to like come in and tinker with it just because you're bored and then break it.
Right.
But on the other hand, it's true that like there's going to be an arc with anything that's working in a church on its like impact in the community. And we tend to ride that arc all the way down until it's not making any impact at all, because no one wants to change it.
Right.
Instead of saying like, hey, we're seeing a declining impact from what we're doing. What if we change the way we were doing to reinvigorate this ministry, this committee, this program, this worship? Yeah.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Oh, yeah. I mean, yeah, if something's work, yeah, because I think I'm personally more motivated by like what's not working,
right,
than by what could be working better. Because it kind of seems like if it's not broke, don't fix it thing.
Okay.
But no, I think that's really true.
Yeah. And I would argue, like, when you're at the peak of it working, that's probably not the time to, like, pick at it. But maybe if it's, I'm doing this with my hand. If you're watching it, this makes sense. If you're listening, maybe not. Picture a bell curve. And if you're on the downhill slope of a bell curve of something you've done for a long time as a church, and it used to be great, but you're looking around, and all of a sudden it feels like, like people aren't being changed. Like, we're not seeing transformation in this. New people aren't sticking with what we're trying to do. Like, it's just the same people doing what we've always done with diminishing results. Like, it's probably better to evaluate it then and say, how might we make a big change to really listen to what God might be calling us to do next, instead of saying we're just going to keep doing it because we're comfortable, like the earlier points,
right,
and ride it out until it's just dead.
Yeah.
And something that wasn't addressed in any of these is, how do you know when is it time to make a change, or when is it time to say, like, we're just not going to do this specific thing anymore at all? Not something we can get to talk about today. But
boy, well, you know what?
What?
I do need a snack.
Okay, it's time. It's snack time. So go get yourself a snack, dear listener. Take a nap if you can. Take care of yourself. This is a hard world out there, and there's a lot of change, and we all got to take care of ourselves.
And we're going to do this again next week. So ask us questions. You can leave them in comments or send them to us over email, or just stop by and say hi.
Yep. All right. See you later.
Bye.
Bye.